I'm Christina Simmonds. I'm a supporter of the Brexit Party. One of the arguments advanced for having a deal, a withdrawal arrangement, is that 48% of the people didn't vote to leave the European Union. Very true. 52% of the people did, on the biggest turnout of electors since the 1983 general election. Over 72% of the population turned out to vote, more than have voted in any general election since 1983. 52% of the people wanted to leave. Quite clear. It's interesting now to hear the arguments by the politicians saying, oh, but 48% didn't want to leave. I'll just give you something to think about, if you like. The highest share of the vote, popular vote, the Conservatives ever achieved since the last World War was in 1955, at 49.7%. It didn't stop them actually forming an administration and carrying out their view of what should happen to this country. They didn't turn to the Labour Party at the time, who were obviously the losers in that election, and say, oh, well, you tell us what you think, because actually a lot of people voted for parties that were not the Conservatives. Same applied in reverse. The Labour Party's highest share of the vote was 48.8% in the 1951 election. They carried out their policies. They didn't talk to the Conservatives, who were the next biggest party, who wanted to do different things. So coming back to the current situation, on a high turnout of 72%, high in traditional terms, Margaret Thatcher in 1983 formed an administration which the BBC I think called a landslide victory at the time, with 42.4% of the popular vote. The Labour Party did not have one iota of influence on what that government carried out. So why, when we've got 52% of the popular vote saying we want to leave, are our politicians so anxious to worry about the 48% that didn't want to leave? I think I can only say that it seems to be on the basis that the establishment, those who like to run things and want to continue to do so in their own way, actually don't want us to leave the European Union. They have their own interests in staying in, which don't necessarily coincide with the public. I think you need to think about those figures. If you get told, but 48% wanted to stay in, therefore we must listen to that 48%. The whole point of democracy, the only reason it functions at all, is with the loser's consent. If every time a Labour government was elected to office and the Tories didn't like it, they took to the streets and they objected and they obstructed, people would be in uproar. They would say that was totally undemocratic. But because it's something the establishment want, they have taken away, or are trying to take away, the value of our vote. And I would just ask a question of that establishment and say, if you take away the value of a person's vote, the true value of being able to vote for things you want as opposed to things you don't want, if you take away that peaceful right of protest, what are you actually saying to people? What are you saying to people about how they can legitimately protest about something they don't agree with? We don't want to end up with riots on the streets, as we have seen in Greece, in Portugal, certainly every weekend in France there's a problem. We don't want that sort of thing. We want our vote to be the way in which we peacefully exercise our democratic right to speak and to be heard and to be listened to. Please value the vote.